Welcome to our afternoon, evening, I guess it could be morning, Power BI user group from the Milwaukee and Chicago user groups. With me, I've got, well, apparently his name's called Screen, so maybe I should rename your name here.
Yeah, that's not good.
Welcome, Screen, to the Screen Time chats.
Welcome, Screen.
There we go.
Such a solid start.
Welcome to Tommy, Seth, and Mike. We're now, again, bombarding your social medias with some more hopefully useful information around Power BI today. Any intros or openers, anything coming up, Seth, that we have event wise? I don't really think we have a whole lot of opener slides for this one. This is kind of just a hello and welcome.
Yeah, no new openers. There's a new blog post out on the Microsoft blog talking about the improved Power BI experience in Excel. Amazing how well integrated things go when data marts is part of the conversation.
Oh, so, boy, here we go.
There's some unique tidbits and some better ways in which to plug into Power BI from Excel. So go check out that blog. But outside of that, the Data Insight Summit is the only big thing coming up that I think you have some special insider info for folks joining us for the user group, don't you?
Yes, we do. So for those of you who are joining the user group, thank you very much for attending. There is a Data Insight Summit, which is coming up this September, and I'll make sure I can try and get this here into the chat window here. For lack of a better purpose, I cannot get this restream chat window show up on my end. There we go. I got it. It's coming up now. I'll try to post the links in there. But the Data Insight Summit is a community event that's being put on in the city of Chicago. We are going. Tommy and I will be speaking at it. Seth will probably be there and heckling from the back, I presume. That seems to be how it goes. And with that event, though, it comes a lot of really great speakers from across the community showing up, talking about Power BI, helping you learn things. So this is one of the few Midwest in-person events that I think that's going around for Power BI. So I'm really excited to be there. We'd also like to share with you a promotion code. So for those of you who are attending or want to attend the event, you can use promo 22 to get $100 off your registration. And that lets them know that it came from us. So promo 22 is the code you'd want to use, and then you can get into the event with a little bit of a discount. So I'll put both those links and the promo code in the chat window as well. That way you can see the promotion code. And I think that's all I have for announcements. Tommy, over to you.
All righty. So let's dive in. So really excited about this one. Definitely, you love when a session comes together or a topic comes together when you're just kind of diving in, like, I wonder if people know about all of these different features after you spend hours and hours of tolling and trying to figure things out, or trying to do a demo right before and realizing that I'm not going to do that one. But this topic, this session kind of really came from, I've been using PowerShell a lot more and more in managing my tenant, utilizing like what's going on with my data sets, with my entities, trying to grab data from part from necessity, part from, what can this do? So, and then I realized that, oh my goodness, there's an amazing resources, and I am not a coder. I'm not a developer. I would not consider myself an expert in PowerShell at all. I constantly have all the articles and help documents up at all times. Like, what does that set of characters do? That being said, you don't have to be an expert in PowerShell or even know a lot to start going with it based on all the resources already available. So let's dive in. And before we should be able to see my screen. Can we share the screen?
We are doing that now. There we go.
Beans. So just a little about myself. My name is Tommy Puglia. I lead the Chicago Power BI user group. Microsoft MVP for 4 years running now. So a lot of the announcements came today. So officially another year of relief, but then now desperation. So I work at CompT in Chicago and also help out on the side with any training, consulting, and governance, and really just love working around the Power BI spectrum. And if you like this session, but wish I spoke a lot less, there is something for you. We call it the Explicit Measures Podcast. The three people on here myself, Mike Carlo, and Seth Bauer. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we release new hour-long episodes, more about the why around Power BI, necessarily the what. This is a very what session, and a lot of things that we learn online are about how to do something, but it's really, we talk about the why in it. Today was about problem solving. Like, what are the points that we problem solve in Power BI, those best practices? How do you actually measure trust? Those are the type of conversations, things that you probably think about, but maybe you talk about with others. You've probably talked about it in a network, like in a network or after hours. That's really what we're all about. So you can find us on Apple and Spotify and on YouTube Live. Anything, Mike?
I think you've got it covered. I think you've got all
Cool.
the key elements there every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 a.m. Sorry for those guys, for those of you who are on the West Coast. Doesn't really bode very well for your timing, but that's what works with our work schedule. So you get what you get. You don't throw a fit. It was free.
Exactly. And you can, again, subscribe on the podcast. The audio apparently is just as fun as the live. So
Exactly.
awesome. So just a few quick things. What's new in Power BI? This is our July user group meeting, or also known as the Lazy June, since we just missed June, but want to talk about some of the new features that have come out. Obviously, data marts are now available in the Power BI desktop to directly connect. A few updates to the goals, aka metrics, aka goals feature in Power BI, and the ability to preview your data sets as a formatted table, but also query in Power Automate. So let's just do that real quick. I'll just show a few of those demos and then we'll dive in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to Power BI in my tenant, and I'm going to go to the dataset hub. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to really choose any particular data set here. In this case, let's choose this VanArstel goals. And okay, this looks like your normal data set hub, looking at the details. I can see if there's any reports connected to it. But what I want to do is on the right-hand side, which is now available, you'll see the tables. Okay, that's interesting. So what I'm going to do is, for any user, it's not just for a builder. What I can do is I'm going to start diving in and say, okay, let's choose the, I don't know, the number of units. Let's choose the date. And then let's kind of dive in and let's just plug in other parts of the table. So we'll say the product category. And you can see automatically a table is being created. And I can add in a measure as well. So listen, total revenue. So automatically you see a table is getting formatted in front of somebody's eyes, which is pretty incredible in terms of what either you want to see of the distinct list in a certain table, or a user can just want to pull something real quick to say, hey, what are the top sales by category? Or what are the top sales based on the latest dates? So what I can do is I can export this to Excel. I can export this in XML. Would love to figure out the use cases for that, or I can customize this with the formatting. So this is a very quick way, something you can train your users on, hey, you don't have the data necessarily exactly available to you in the report. Well, just go into the data set hub. You can create your own table. Obviously, there's no filters, but you can export it and then really begin to slice and dice it yourself. So this is, to me, a great part of the adoption roadmap that we've talked about.
So this is one thing I want to point out very clearly. I think this is a good feature for, I need access to data. And we've talked about this in the podcast before, where there's like two layers of what kind of reporting you need. One is I can't even see the data, and I need a way of exporting or getting it out into some way I can see it. This is a solution to that, I think. Just give me access to the information so I can give you a data set and say, here you go look at this data set. Here's the data that is in here. And now you can go interrogate, look at it, and export tables of information, which I'd argue, I don't think Power BI desktop or Power BI reports are really great for just dropping loads of data. This seems a much better solution here, with the caveat of what Tommy just mentioned, which was there's no way to filter it. So you kind of get all the data.
Yeah.
So maybe not the best option. But anyways.
Hey man, if you're using it, you want to slice and dice by yourself anyway. So
exactly. You want to get all of it out anyway. So let's just abuse PowerBI.com, export all the data to CSV.
Everything.
And then make more tables somewhere else. Anyways, good feature. I like this one. I think this is a great improvement. I think I'd like to see this one actually have some additional. What happens when you hit customize, Tommy? Does that take you into?
Yeah, it just takes me in the formatted table view.
Okay, and this is the paginated report builder then, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, so it just kind of auto creates a table for you and drops you into this builder space. Would be nice if they had a filter pane there. That's all you need is the filter pane, and it solves the problem.
Well, it's everything except, yeah, there's no filter. I mean, it should look easy to add, actually, if anything.
We'll see. Maybe we should put that in ideas.power.com and see how long it takes for that to get through. Jab, jab, jab.
Jab, jab, jab. Awesome. So what else we got? So
it's a great way to say thank you today.
So the other new feature that's actually out, and this is really cool. I know they've been working on this for a while, but you can actually now query data using the API, and it's actually available in the Power Automate. So imagine I had this particular app here, and I had some of the things looking at, in this case, a demo, and I wanted to generate all the activity for a particular invoice, right? So dummy app, dummy, dummy layout. But what I can actually do is if I click on this particular button here, it's actually going to send out, and I'll show the run history here. It'll actually send out general info and take a look at basically what was pulled. And you can see I'm actually pulling a query, and I can see pulling from the consulting expense, pulling the phase. And you can get this query that you need to pull exactly from the performance monitor and Power BI desktop. Just literally copy a query from a table visual, just plug it into this particular item, and you can see it's actually going to pull in all that information. And you can see exactly what it's going to pull in. And then you can parse it as JSON, make a CSV file for it, and save it somewhere. And again, it's as easy as just going to Power Automate, saying how you want it to generate. It doesn't have to be Power Apps. But in this case, you can see here, I'm just doing the query. I have the invoice key in this example, and I'm saying, what do I want to pull and how do I want to pull it? There's still some features that are a bit limited, but in terms of trying to do a query on the fly, and also maybe even allowing users to get some summary high-level information, pulling this back to a Power Apps, honestly, the potential here is pretty open in terms of the use cases. So I would actually love to see people's samples on how they're utilizing this query, like, run a query in Power BI. So, and I believe the last one is finally we can connect to data marts in Power BI desktop. This is of the latest release. You can see the data hub, data marts. If I had a data mart here, again, we're going to actually be talking about this on the podcast. So should be a fun conversation. Again, it behaves kind of like a live data set, but everything you create, this is the best way to connect to the data hub, or in a sense, the only way in Power BI desktop, except for trying to copy a server, but you don't have to worry about that. So those are some of the main updates from our latest conversation, or our latest since we've last talked. Preview data marts. There's been updates to metrics. If you have not seen them, they can now track the targets, which is a huge feature. So you can see targets and your metrics over time. All righty, unless we don't have any questions, let's dive in to PowerShell and Power BI, and just a quick introduction. And I want to introduce this because, again, I don't consider myself super intelligent, semi-intelligent, anywhere around there, but I like to learn and I like to figure things out. And PowerShell kept creeping up in the Power BI world. Like, hey, there's a PowerShell Power BI module. You can connect to your tenant and do a bunch of things. Well, that seems cool because one, it's not available in the tenant itself, and two, PowerShell seems like something I can automate. And that's exactly what PowerShell is. So for those who are first hearing about this or have heard about it, seen it on your Windows start, but have not touched it, it's actually been around for a really long time, and it's been talked about for a really long time to kind of a combination of a command line tool, which again can scare people, as actual language where you can have scripting files, run it, and basically automate a bunch of things, or just basically run certain things from a command line. And again, just like a lot of other languages, you can extend what PowerShell can do based on installing modules. Really, anyone can install a module. Microsoft obviously has a ton to connect to Azure, obviously Power BI, the Power Platform, SharePoint. And what they allow you to do is actually, in a sense, they're creating functions. So like if I wanted to create or copy a SharePoint site or download a template from SharePoint, there's a module for that. With Power BI, obviously what we're talking about today, there's incredible ability to grab data from Power BI or to post data to Power BI. And we're going to utilize all of that today. And again, we're not going to talk about necessarily what are the different components and how to actually write PowerShell. we're going to, again, utilize what people have already created and what you can begin to plug and play, so to speak. So let's dive into this connection. So this is actually an amazing feature where, again, some things that don't even use the Power BI module, but the ones that do, we can actually invoke the REST API. So you can actually, rather than just using what's available in PowerShell, I can say, hey, just call the Power BI REST API and do a bunch of things for me. Anything that's available in the Power BI REST API. If you've ever used it, you know you can grab all your data sets. You can actually copy a Power BI desktop file. You can see what users are available in a workspace, delete a workspace, copy a workspace, change the status. And what we can do with PowerShell, and then especially for our session today, is I want to copy some information. I need to know our activity, the refresh history of my data sets. Where is that available to look at? It's honestly really nowhere. You can use the gateway logs, but it's not necessarily per data set, and it's a little convoluted how the data comes in. Just to put for reference on how powerful PowerShell is, a majority of the external tools in Power BI actually utilize PowerShell to some degree. So why don't we take a look at that? Let's take a look at some of the more main external tools you may have used or seen that are available, and actually look at the back end. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at the external tools, and we're actually going to just kind of break down the script a bit, and just to see how PowerShell is actually working. And again, nothing too crazy, but just to get the idea of the skeleton of PowerShell. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Power BI on my desktop, and I have here a majority of, if I can make sure this actually opens, and we'll let this open. And you can see I have a bunch of external tools, and they all look like applications, which is cool. But you know what I actually want to do is I actually want to look at this export to a data flow. And you can actually see here, right here, this particular external tool will take all my Power Query, all my queries, and actually create a file, a JSON file that I can just simply import into Power BI to make data flows. So you can see it when I open that, it opens export to data flow and gives me a few options. All of a sudden a Windows Explorer opens, and you can see here, Chicago Pug. This saves, the data flow saved. And then immediately what I can do is take that particular file right here, and I can actually just open that, which should have worked, and then take that, import it into Power BI as a data flow. So pretty powerful, right? But let's take a look at the back end. So all it is, if you actually looked at the Power BI external tool, all it's really doing, and I'm going to have VS Code open, and if you've not used it, this is the time. We're going to just look at some of the basic things here that is happening in PowerShell. So you can see here, someone's added a description, the script file, what it's actually doing. And you can see that there's a few important things that every PowerShell script, especially if you begin to start looking at your own, are these things called params or parameters. Power BI, the documentation, when they talk about external tools, says you can actually push the server name, the server ID, and the database over to PowerShell, or really over to other tools. In this case, you see I'm calling the parameters. And then in this case, this write host is basically saying what's going to show up on the console, or the console for those who are inclined. And you see I can basically substitute the parameter in any way. So again, if you use Power Query or use DAX, you kind of understand variables and parameters. This is very similar. The next few things that are going on here is just going to install some packages for me. And again, these are packages or modules that allow me to do other things like the analysis services, just required information. So finally, when we go down here, you can see, again, we're not going to dive into each particular part of this, but you can see, at least see here with this analysis service, it's a third party or a module or a package, and I can connect to the server, to the database, and basically grab the module or the model right here and store it as a parameter or as a variable. And then I can grab all the information. In this case, you can see it's grabbing the query groups, doing a for each, grabbing the query groups, putting it into an object in PowerShell, splitting each of the queries, and basically putting in the right format that JSON accepts. So again, we're not going to have to write this together, but that's all it's doing. And again, here's how we're creating the queries. It's going through each of these and getting the query ID, the query name. It's taking the previous parameters that we had and basically appending it together. So the more you know about this, you can see the cooler it is in terms of I can extract stuff from some parts and then basically create an object or that can store multiple information in it. It's very similar to if you worked with arrays and obviously in JSON objects. There's a lot of documentation on this, but a lot of the PowerShell scripts that you utilize are using PowerShell and to that expression. And all you're doing is basically pushing your database and your port over and running a script. And that's all external tools doing. Now there's some tools that are obviously an application, but a lot of them are all they're doing is just running a script with some required parameters. So there's another one here, and that's the Hotswap Connections. This is obviously one of the cool ones where I can actually just take this Power BI script file, and I think Power BI Tips has a few videos on this as well. And what I can actually do here is basically copy this report and basically make a live data set out of it that's connected to the local. So let's say copy and connect. And I'm going to say the file name. Actually, I think we want to open the Power BI desktop file, correct? If I'm correct, Mike, haven't used this in a while.
Yeah, that's yours.
So
if you're gonna,
let's open that.
If you're gonna split the PBX file in half, you will click on the file so are you using the splitter or just Hotswap? Okay, if you're using Hotswap Connections, you are trying to switch the connection from the PowerBI.com service to a local desktop model. So what you'd be doing is you'd be downloading the file from the service or opening a file with a live connection in it. And then once you open that file with the live connection, it will delete all of the connection information and basically give you a report back that has no connection inside it. And then what you can do is you can open said report and you can repoint it to an analysis services environment that would be local. So it allows you to just strip out the connection, point it at local development, do what you got to do, and then you can delete the connection again and then repoint it back to PowerBI.com, which will then let you switch back and forth. Why they don't let you just retool that connection, I don't know, but they definitely have hard coded so you can't just easily adjust that. So this should begin to start running, and what will happen is in the script, again, let's just take a look at the back end of this. You can see this is the script that's basically being called. Again, big thanks to Steve Campbell. Obviously, Steve knows PowerShell, so we're not going to dive in. This is quite the long script here, but what's going to happen is he's basically extracting all of that, as Mike said, and this is all done in a PowerShell script. Everything that Mike just said and being able to basically take those connections happens all in PowerShell. And again, I'm going to go through here. Actually, let's just try a different file. So let's say copy and connect. Let's try Van Arsdale goals. So now it'll run because the Power BI is already open. And all the PowerShell is doing is going to create that local model for me. So because I already had the file open, that's why I wasn't going to open. So PowerShell is not only doing that extraction, and you actually see here that I have this Van Arsdale goals report. You can actually see that it's this is a live connection, and it's a live connection to the local model, the one that's already open. So you see this table names are exactly the same. So pretty darn cool on what it can do. But again, the ability to open Power BI, the ability to take that and basically say, hey, actually take this local files and point it to another to a model that's open. All this can happen in PowerShell. So again, if there's another language you have time to learn, hopefully I'm beginning to sell you on PowerShell. The last one I wanted to showcase was I actually started generating my own because I was looking at what all those PowerShell scripts were doing. And I think MKE Friedman had one that allowed you to basically do a cleaner, like what tables and columns can you remove from your tool. The problem with it was you had to basically open up a Power BI file, say where you want to, where's the file you want to connect it to. So I kind of just took it upon myself to say, what if I created my own? So I actually have here, again, a lot of copy and paste in here. And you can see, I just basically kind of understood there's a function that I could create where I say, open the document in Power BI, I open it in Excel.
I can take where the default location of the file is, and I can basically say, where's the location of this Power BI template file, and then function open in Power BI, invoke this PBIT location. So it's just opening the location of the application. And once we run this, you'll see PowerShell will open, and we'll see there might be a little issue right there, but let's say open in Power BI. See if Power BI is going to open for me, if this should work. And this should connect to this model, refresh, and it's basically going to, again, just do that documentation for me. So again, a lot of times, rather than trying to do all of this manually, I can actually say here, okay, all I need is the port number and the report file. So you still do need that information, but that's pretty easy to, in a sense, do, where I can copy the port, again, another PowerShell script. I can see here, here's the port number, the report file. I can just easily take that from a Windows Explorer, which will open here. And then we're just going to load that. And again, that's going to load that documentation for me. So I just have this quick and easy way to easily do some more automation for me that before was not available. So the majority of the external tools you see on my Power BI desktop, again, are running PowerShell to clean the cache, the document model, split the Power BIX file, to copy the server port. All that's coming from a PowerShell script or utilizing it in some way. So that's the basics of the power of what PowerShell can do. And here is my document model. You can see that is opening right here. And again, this is from the BI account. And you can see here, it's just going to basically load in and say me, what tables can I remove? And I can see here, hey, I have this select. Can I delete it or can I keep it? And it's already generated for me. So it's a great way to look at your model and say, how much do I need? Where is it used, or is it used anywhere at all? And can I really clean up my report? So that is the basics of our, when we're dealing with PowerShell here. And I'm going to just make sure to close a few of these guys just so we're not dealing with too much open. Mike, do you got anything?
No questions yet. We're good to go. Let's keep on cruising. Seth, did you have any comments around the Power BI split report item?
I do not.
You guys use that one though at your company though, right? Use the split PBIX tool or the live connection 3-point?
We do a lot of shenanigans around rejiggering models, rehooking up, reconnecting, splitting off. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we like using that in the local development area where you have a two model, you know, it's the concept of the two model design, right? We have a model and we have a thin report. And so PowerBI.com hasn't made it very easy for us to move between a development model and a production model at this point. So we'll see where that goes.
Awesome. So yes.
One thing I forgot to mention, Tommy. For those of you who want to get these external tools that Tommy was pointing at or using today, most of them, I believe, are covered inside a tool that Power BI Tips manages called Business Ops. So another community contributor, James Bartlett, and I work on managing and adding additional features to a tool called Power BI Business Ops. It's just a business operation tool. You can download that tool, install it, and then you can add all the different external tools that Tommy was showing you from that Business Ops tool. And I'll put a link in the chat window for that as well. All right, back to you, Tommy.
All righty. So you might have heard of GitHub by now, and you might have been a little, I don't know, think it's more for developers. It's certainly not for Power BI. Well, you would be very wrong at this point. Maybe 2 years, 3 years ago, there wasn't a lot of resources online for GitHub and the Power Platform, but that has drastically changed, where basically GitHub has become an amazing resource, an amazing set of examples, tools, and applications as well that you can download, copy, and overall just use or see examples of how to really extend your knowledge and your expertise of the Power BI ecosystem outside of just the user interface. from training to obviously some amazing PowerShell scripts to also amazing tabular editor scripts in C# or C# that are all available for you to easily copy and paste and just start beginning to utilize. And again, it's an amazing source of knowledge that the community has done, and it's also easy to find and list. I personally browse GitHub all the time, and really what I can do in my own personal profile or account is I can save certain repos, or called repositories. Think of them as collections, folders, the files, the README, all that information that you may need. And these amazing resources, I can basically save it, clone that particular collection to my computer, or just download the zip, all those files, and do whatever I want with it. So the more and more you learn about GitHub, and the more you see that with Power BI, the more I think you'll probably create your own internal scripts repo, or just utilize what others have already built. So they really are an amazing example. And Mike, I know you use them a lot as well. So again, it's really not just Power BI as well. It's if you're in the Power Platform, Power Automate, and Power Apps, there's an amazing collection, amazing set of resources out there on other components in Power Apps, other entire solutions that Microsoft has had. Creator Kit, the Center of Excellence Kit for Power Apps. That's all available, and you download it on GitHub. So at some point, you've probably gone to it because of some Microsoft documentation. Side note, Microsoft owns GitHub. So there's a lot of synergy there. But this collection of, okay, how in the world does Power BI play with a developer and commits and history? Well, pretty darn well, in terms of, especially when we're dealing with a lot of code and a lot of scripting. And that's really where Power BI comes, and GitHub come really the best in handy. So a few things that you will need, some prerequisites. You're going to need Git installed on your computer if you want to iterate or get the latest versions of a repository. In this case, we'll call it a repo. The number one tool I recommend you download is Visual Studio Code. This was something that took me some time to, we'll say, kind of understand how it works, because I'm like, where's the settings? Where's this feature? Where's the UI? And understanding that there's everything based on a command, Control Shift P, which basically brings up this command prompt. That was very foreign to me. But now that I utilize it, it's very hard to go to something without that setting. You're going to want PowerShell obviously installed on your computer, preferably PowerShell 7. Once you download Visual Studio Code, you're going to need some extensions. One's a PowerShell one, and it will look for where PowerShell is located on your computer. If you have Windows, you should already have PowerShell. You're probably going to want some of your IDs. And if you're using any, let's say, service principal right now in Power BI, you have a tenant ID, an app ID, an app secret. And you're probably going to want to have these handy somewhere, because you're going to want to either plug them in somewhere in the code, so it can basically, on behalf of you or on behalf of the registered app, run through Power BI and do a bunch of things. So let's kind of dive in. Again, this will be recorded so you can follow along as well. All the repos and the links will be available as well. So let's clone a repo. Let's do something really simple and clone a very basic repo, and then just start, in a sense, playing around with it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to get one, and we're going to take an example of writing to Power BI goals. We're going to actually copy a goal, and we're going to get the then we're also going to get activity, and then we're going to showcase notebooks. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up a repo here, and this is from, oh man, alive. So the Power BI Microsoft MVP, Mike, I am failing on his name because I know I can't pronounce it. So, or Stefan Rezi. And he has this repo that he started to create that is basically,
it's listed as, it looks like Stefan, but I think it's just Steven, if you should say it in English.
Or Steven. Yeah.
Just go with Steven.
We'll go with Steven. Sorry, Steven. So you can see here, he's been starting creating this particular repo, and you can see here I can, if I actually look in the repo, I can duplicate goal to the same workspace or to another workspace. So all I'm going to do is I actually have an extension on my browser, so I can actually clone this with VS Code. So I'm going to make sure I have the right one open. So we got this guy here. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to say clone to VS Code. That's going to bring up Windows Explorer. And in this case, we'll say I have a GitHub on my computer. Also, word to the wise, if you're cloning GitHub repos, do not do it in a OneDrive synced folder because of naming, and you're already syncing something. So just try to do it on your PC, like your C drive with a folder called GitHub. It makes things a lot easier. So I'm going to create one here. We'll call this PowerShell demos. And this is where I'm going to save all my cloned files. So I'm going to say select repository location. And now I'm in Visual Studio. And what we're actually going to do here is I can see there's this new folder called goals. And obviously there's a few extensions we want to deal with here. So we'll say here, there's source control, which I can see if there's any repos on this particular computer. And I can see there's the scorecards here. And this is a way if I want to see if there's any updates to that particular repository. Again, my extensions in VS Code, obviously there's PowerShell. There's a GitHub repo as well. So you obviously when you install Git, and you can see here's the PowerShell extension. You just install it, and then you can start really playing around with new features with VS Code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this folder I created over here, and I'm just going to go and we'll say to another workspace, to the same workspace. So here's this Power BI script or PowerShell script that what it's going to do is it's going to log into Power BI, because that's one of the Microsoft Power BI management in module. It's going to grab all the authorization that it needs, and then it's going to prompt me at the very end to say, hey, where do you want to save this particular goal, and what goal do you want to copy? So I already have all that information available. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press Control Shift P, and I can type in PowerShell run. And then this is going to bring up this little prompt, and you can see here, it's going to sign into Power BI for me. And it's basically saying, hey, what do you want to do? Copy goals to an existing scorecard or quit? Again, this is all happening below. Actually, let's try that again. So that doesn't work, but you can basically see there's a prompt here that you can run in PowerShell. So if you need to always do this, like what days you want to run, say, let's copy the goals. So what's the source scorecard ID? Again, I already have this available. So we'll say, here's the source ID. Oh, that was not right. So that is obviously the invalid one. Let's run it again. Log in. And then it's going to prompt me again, obviously. So let's do this. And obviously copy goals. So the scorecard ID, enter the source goal ID. You can see it's actually grabbing for me the workspace. So the scorecard is the Chicago Pug scorecard. Here's the workspace ID. So it grabs that information, again, all coming from these custom functions that Steven has written. And I got the goal ID. Okay, now it's got the goal ID. It's got the goal name. You can see it's saved it as an object for me. So how many duplicates do I want to create? Say 1. You can see basically it's duplicated that scorecard in the same place. So if we actually go to Power BI, and let's go to this guy, let's go to our Chicago scorecard. And if we actually scroll all the way down, we should see there's a placeholder, and it should take a little time to actually load, but basically he sets up, I did not create this placeholder here. This came directly from the PowerShell script. It's actually posted to the scorecard with this, what he's calling a placeholder, and that's going to copy all the information from this sales margin current month, including the connections, the values, and you can see the target as well. So it's going to basically copy that scorecard. So that's just an example of plugging and play. All I needed was, I didn't even need an app registration. I just had to log into Power BI, but I needed some information. Again, you can always get pretty quickly. So let's do the next one. And actually a really neat one is actually Rui Romano has one that is basically allowing you to monitor a lot of information. You'll see how we're going to pull this all together today. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to clone this repo. Again, it's going to open up a folder for me. We'll go to GitHub. I'll go to this PowerShell demos, and we're going to select that location. I'm going to add it to the workspace so I can add multiple repos to the same workspace here. And you can basically see here that there's some of the information. There's a bunch of scripts that Rui has, and all we have to just go to the README. And again, I can easily preview this, and you can see basically what you need to have in order to run this. So I can deploy this as an Azure function or just local PowerShell. And you can see, what do you need? Permissions to create an app directory, the tenant settings. You need something part of your security group. So it goes through all the settings that you need in order to get this start up and running. So one of the things that Rui did is he basically has this run setting, which is basically looking at this config file. And this is really cool. And this is just one of the aspects of PowerShell that I'm beginning to learn, where let's say you always have that app ID, registration, and output folder, all that information, but you always want to constantly paste and into each individual script all the information. Well, what you can actually do is extract, in this case, a JSON file, and because it's and make it an object, and always pull that in any PowerShell script. Say, hey, I have a config file, pull that, and let's put it in. So what I'm going to do here is, just for the sake of sharing, is I'm going to go to my config scanner. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull some of this information in here. So you can see here I have a demo here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in this particular one here. I'm going to pull in the app ID. And I'm going to put it into his config file. And then I'm going to go back to my tenant ID. I'm going to grab that. And then I'm going to put in my app secret. And we'll put that in. We'll put that in right here. If I can find it. Here we go. We'll put my app secret in. Now I have everything basically ready to go with this config scanner. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to his scripts. And again, I'm just going to close some of this here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this particular one, and it says the scripts to run. So you can actually see it's going to refresh the data set, get the activity, and pull the catalog of everything. And you can see part of the config file also would show me where should I save the data. So all I have to do here is basically just run the file, and it's basically getting the OAuth token for me, and it's starting to get this audit data. You can see here this output starting to get the activity fetch. It's pulling that information for me and starting with the latest date, saving it to a file for me. And you can see where it's actually going to save it for me in this GitHub PowerShell demos. And then we can actually pull up just to show how that's actually going in real time. So let's take a look at Windows Explorer. We'll pull up the PBI monitor. And you actually see here that now there's this data file. And if I go to activity, it's going to start generating these files for me automatically. You'll see that it keeps adding the files for me as JSON files. This is my activity that's automatically running for me. And you can see it's automatically generating the new file. That's your activity that's saved as local in a folder. So this allows you to actually get your usage. And again, not just usage, but what are people doing in the tenant? Are they creating workspaces? Are they exporting tiles or exporting data? Are they sharing it? What is all the your activity in your tenant occurring?
So what would be some of the key in exporting all the activity data inside your tenant, Tommy? What are the key things that you think that you're looking for inside those data files?
So there's just a huge one. So one, rather than utilizing the tenant to get your usage that only stores the last 60 days.
Correct.
What I want to do is and again, it's a live connection. It's not local. I can actually pull and create my own metrics, or pull like the last 30 days versus the previous, or the 30-day rolling versus the previous 30 days, and actually see what are the most used reports, what are the new reports. Looking at how many people are exporting or analyzing Excel. Is that going down or up, or people viewing more reports? So all that information, then the more information you grab, and over time, what you actually can do is then begin to pull that into year to date, year over year, month over month, to actually see, are you growing with your usage? Not only that, but then you can finally see all the people creating reports in your tenant. When did they create it and what are they creating? So from a BI team point of view, or from the really growing your BI, are people using the right reports? I created one of the examples is we created one that shows, hey, what reports have been used? How many days since they've been viewed? And then who's been viewing them? But not only that, I also have, because I can pull in the departments from Exchange, who's been viewing reports and and I can see based on each report, when's the last time user X viewed this report. So we've talked about this too from a governance point of view. If one person's asking for data all the time, but they don't look at the reports, this is your actual stats to say, okay, you're asking for 18 reports, but you never view them. So how important is it? And actually nobody views them. So this is also part of that from the cataloging point of view.
So you're pretty much looking for, and Dan in the chat makes a really good note here. He's talking about, looking for people who are dumping things straight to Excel and talking to those individuals, because there's likely an unmet need inside potentially those reports that people are saying, I can get half the way there, but I'm missing some information or some other things there that potentially I would want to add or enhance my reporting with.
1000%.
And the other area that I think you're looking at here, Tommy, too, is you're also looking at how many times are these reports being viewed, and then you have some internal data around. It sounds like you're doing things like how many requests are coming in, right? So who's requesting new reports, and are they even looking at those reports they already have?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So it really gives us all that full insight into everything going on in our tenant, and to see, are we actually making that waves where the number of users, viewing reports.
Yep. Seth, you're going to jump in there for something?
Yeah, well, the question is, right, there were multiple ways in which we could access some of the activity data. Do you know where, or if this set of activities that he's capturing is like part of the technical documentation of Microsoft, like on their API stuff that you have access to?
Yeah, so there's a lot of operations, and I will showcase this, but they don't necessarily what each one does, so to speak. You kind of have to assume that view report means view report. But there's documentation, because obviously you're pulling in the API, but there's not documentation on each activity, what it's doing, so to speak, like the actual definition.
So, but the scheme is the same in all the exported JSONs. So you're basically, when you're reporting on it, probably just going to consume them all at the same time from the same folder.
Exactly. And a few other things too, why the PowerShell comes in handy is with the API, you can't pull multiple days. You can only pull a day at a time when you do a get. So this actually iterates over each day and pulls each one to a file. So then you can obviously in Power BI iterate over the folder. I recommend doing JSON. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, so originally you had kind of started with, when you're using other methods, there's a window of time that you're bound to. Are you still bound by the same time windows using this? So it's like a 60-day as far back.
So it's actually, I believe, only 30 days you can pull the API from. So if you need to start today, and then just run it once a week, and just so you can always make sure you have all the data, because again, after 30 days, you cannot pull from here. And it's gone forever, so to speak.
Gone forever. Gone with the wind.
Gone with the wind. And you see that's where Rui actually started here, pulling from June 5th. So you can pull the 30 days, because his script is saying, okay, pull 30 days for go and start from there and just basically count up. So again, are there any questions in the chat?
Not necessarily a question, but maybe a comment from Dan. So Dan says, yes, there is documentation on all the different kinds of activities in the log and where that comes from. I'm trying to track down that documentation, or the link to that documentation. So Dan, if you're online, hit me up in Teams and I will snag the link from you, and I will put it in the chat window here. You can grab me that link for where the activity logs belong.
Perfect.
Thanks. All right, Tommy, good to go.
Yep. So the last GitHub repo we're going to take a look at is actually from our very good friend Alex Powers. And if you've used Python, you may have heard of Jupyter Notebooks. Well, did you know you can actually use a Jupyter Notebook with PowerShell and .NET, which is pretty cool, which makes it very easy also to begin to understand what you can do in PowerShell. So I need to play more around with this feature because obviously we're not a huge Python shop, but utilizing this is pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is the same path that I've done before. I have my repo here, or my VS Code workspace. I'm going to clone with VS Code. It's going to open up here. Make sure to save it in the right spot. And we'll select that repo. We'll make sure to add to workspace. And now what you can actually see is Alex has a bunch of notebooks, and you can see here, these notebooks behave a little differently. It's almost like a user-friendly interface for running PowerShell. So let's say I actually had one here where I actually wanted to run. In this case, I wanted to look at all the Power BI user licenses. So when I go here, you can actually see that you can actually format this, and it makes it a very clean way of looking at, again, what's going on. So we'll make this .NET interactive. And you see here is this particular one would grab for me all the user licenses that are going on that are in my tenant, and what license they have for Power BI. Do they have a premium per user? Do they have a free? Do they have a pro? So it's basically telling you, in a sense, it blocks each part of the script up where you can run them individually, where if you have this large file, in a sense, you can just do this in a sense yourself. So let's grab another one. Let's grab the gateway overview. You can see here, we'll make sure this is .NET Interactive. And you can see the data gateway, basically, what do I need to pull? So I can run this. Let's see if this works. Failed to connect the document metadata. Let's see, error unknown language, .NET Interactive. So let's try this guy here. Let's make this PowerShell. So let's run this guy, and you see this should run. And when it runs, it should be able to do everything it needs to do. And you can see here is installing a data package gateway for me. So it's installing a module for me. That's exactly what I want it to do. And now it's installed, and you'll see exactly when it's installed. So you'll see here, this will basically grab all that information for me. You can see how long it takes to install this particular module. And you can see what Alex does for you is actually like, hey, return all the available commands that you can do with this module. So let's run this guy. See, searching help for the data gateway, and it happens in real time. So Jupyter Notebooks are awesome, especially I think when it comes to PowerShell and Power BI. Alex has done a lot of these. I think there need to be more. And you can see here is he's basically helped you see, here's all the commands that you can do. I can get a gateway cluster, remove a cluster, disconnect the service account. So let's do this one. Let's connect to the gateway. Again, I want to make sure this is in PowerShell. Let's run this guy. And my browser opens. I choose which one I want to connect to. Bam, I am connected. And you see there's my tenant ID. And then I can basically say, oh, you know what? I'm going to do organization. So, or we'll say individual. So let's make sure this is in PowerShell. We'll run this one. So now I save that parameter as individual. And now let's just return the gateway clusters. And again, it's remembering all the information rather than doing all this in a very long size of a giant script. And you can see here's all my gateways. Here's all the information. Then I can get the gateway statuses. Again, it's remembering all the variables. So Jupyter Notebooks, again, I'll make sure these links are available afterwards, but are an amazing tool of really connecting to my Power BI, and then again seeing what's going on. And I can, again, now I can see the status is real time, especially if you're dealing with a lot of data gateways. Or I can even update it here, or see a list of gateways where I need to upgrade a certain gateway. So rather than trying to do this all in your tenant, and you might not have access to your tenants, again, depending on your Active Directory settings or your credentials, your permissions, you can really get a lot of this in here. Again, huge feature using GitHub to easily clone these. Now, few things, don't push this back, especially with your own secrets and IDs to someone else's repo. They would not appreciate that. And also then you're making your secrets and information available to the public. So you can clone a repo, you can fork one, which means basically take that version, and now I have my own repo under Tommy Puglia's repo. So it's kind of saved for yourself, and you can always get the latest version and update it. Obviously, we're not going to go into Git today. All right, so let's put this all together and we'll round out the rest of the demo. And again, in terms of just learning what we can do. So now a few quick things that all this is utilizing, again, PowerShell modules, and again, even calling the REST API. So I'll just kind of showcase here. There are all the documents available on using the Power BI PowerShell commands or the module. And you can see here all the things you can do with just direct PowerShell. I can get a Power BI data set, and it tells you everything that you need to do. Basically, get a Power BI data set, and you see if you just run that plain vanilla, it just returns all the data sets the user has access to. Again, you can store that in a parameter, and you can basically pull those as an object. Or I can use these filters. You can see here, I can say, scope for the organization. So all the organizations, I can actually add a Power BI column to a new Power BI data set. I have not tried that. Haven't thought of trying that yet. Or I can create a new Power BI data set. Again, obviously this gets a little more advanced, but these documents are huge in terms of what's available to you. Again, and what they've done here too is you can see there's this one module or one command says invoke the Power BI REST. So that takes what's available in the module and then gives you all this information that's available in the Power BI REST API. So you don't need Postman or your own tool. All you need is the PowerShell module, and you can invoke your REST API this way. So you can just simply use a Power BI or PowerShell script to call the REST API, which again, really opens up the board, especially if you're not comfortable with REST APIs. And again, the best part of this is unlike just using a simple Postman or HTTP call, I can iterate over everything that it returns, save it as a parameter, or save it somewhere, and then have that script available for me at any time. So let's put that all together. And what I've actually done, and which I do need to clean, but I will have the script available for everyone, is I have multiple tenants that I deal with. And with that, I have the activity, I have the refresh history that I want to get, like what data sets are refreshing, how long do they take, what's the percentage that they refresh successfully. But there's also another repo out there that I want to showcase here. That is from Dave Ruger. That's actually the best practice analyzer that's available in Tabular Editor. That basically tells you how your model's doing in terms of things you should fix with it. Well, he actually said, you know what? I'm going to go crazy, and I'm going to create a way that I'm going to do that, not just on what model you have open, but over your entire tenant. So what he's actually done is basically create a PowerShell script that will run across your entire tenant, save basically the rules, all the things that have occurred in your module, and save those in local files, which is obviously amazing in terms of from a governance. Are people following the best practices? You can add your own rules if you want to, because it's all coming from the Tabular Editor.com and from a file. So you could say, actually point to the rules that I've created and run across my tenant and then create a report from it, go full circle. So I have all these different scripts that I have from all these repos, and I decided, like, well, what if I just one script to rule them all that I can just basically do everything in? But I have all these tenants with all these IDs and all these folder locations. Well, I don't want to have to create a script for every tenant. So what I have here is, again, the final script, which we'll take a look at in here. And we're going to pull this, open this, and I'm going to go to...
Hey, Tommy, there's a comment from the chat here. This is a cautionary tale, I guess, of running this script. So I think I'm going to put a big red bold warning or caution or be aware, message on this one. This script runs on every workspace that the service principal has access to.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have added your service principal to many workspaces, hundreds plus kind of thing, this is a script that will run against all of those. So just
Yes.
be careful or mindful that this is a very powerful script and will likely very quickly eat across your tenant if you're not careful. Just want to point that out.
Very, very good point. So, and what I've actually done is I have that config file again that I already talked about, and I again have created 2 objects in a way that what I can do is let's run it and let's go crazy. So let's run this, and you're going to see it's going to prompt me. Actually, let's do the internal scripts here. I'm going to actually open the internal script workspace. So let's run this guy. I have this best practice analyzer automation. And again, I have my own private repo here that what I'm going to do that we should be able to do. Again, that should be available here. So let's run this guy. We have internal scripts. I have this best practice analyzer automation, and let's run it. Once PowerShell starts actually loading. So we'll let this run. PowerShell is currently loading. Oh, because I need to stop running the other PowerShell scripts. All right, here we go. Let's run this guy. And you can see here, there's a first prompt here that's actually showing me, hey, do you want to connect to one tenant or the other for getting all the information? Okay, I want to choose the Puglia BI. So now it's going to, for the activity information, rather than always having to plug in what days I want, it says enter a month, but it's going to default for me and knows what month it is. Yeah, let's just pull July, and the start date, current day is 5. So I'm going to say 0. And now you can actually see that it's going to start running for me some of the refresh history. And you see it's going through all this refresh history on each data set from each workspace. I don't have to define each workspace individually. And you can see now it's going to start running for me. And again, I can write little prompters where it says, now we're doing the activity. But now it's running all the activity for me in a certain folder, again, based on that JSON file that have this object ID that says, hey, if you chose tenant 2, then the folder location for activities here, the app IDs over here, the app secrets here. So it's going to start running this. And then finally, it's going to start running from Dave Ruger, the best practice analyzer. His opens up a template file every time. I don't necessarily need to do that because if I already have the files located, I can just run this again every time. And you can see here that some of the stuff he's telling me the rules that, you know, this were the entity name, the key influencers violates the rule, avoid camel case. So it's telling me some of the rules, but it's also saving that to a file. So as that runs, I'm actually going to show you that example of basically what we've been able to do where I actually have a Power BI activity report file that is connected to that SharePoint location because I saved it in a SharePoint location where the file is output. And then I basically iterate over it. And you can actually see here that I can see the, you know, all that data that came from a JSON file where I have the activity information. I can see how many times I've gotten a goal, which is quite a bit. And I can see the workload, which user did that activity. I can see what the item name was if there was an item name here. So I can see basically, okay, here's the generated, in this case, generate a data flow token. If I don't want that one, let's say, let's take away all those guys. And you see view the data flow. Okay, how many times did I view the data flow? I refresh the data set, analyzed by an external application. So usually means Excel. And you can see all that information on even what device it occurred on. So obviously you do need some permissions for this. You can see there's a data set name. You can see if it's import. And really now you just have this data set that, and again, it iterates over time. Every time you run it, you refresh your report. And I can see here's the view reports by week and year. I got a few things here. I can see basically some of that information on like how many days since someone's viewed a report. So let's take this table. Let's take the item name here. And I'm basically going to add this one that says like days since the report's been viewed. So then I can combine this together to basically say, wow, no one's viewed the mailbag and since the day, obviously, since it's loaded. I can look at the Puglia BI data catalog. Okay, it has been viewed, but how many times has it been viewed? How many users? So then I can get to see it's only been viewed once. I can see a lot of that information. But again, using that refresh history, I also have in here basically the number of refreshes. So let's combine that together. And let's say I believe it's item workspace. So let's pull that in here. See if this works. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to combine this together, and now I'm going to get the refreshes. So I can see the refresh and the refresh percentage. It should work. Let's just make sure our relationship works out. Seth, don't judge on this particular. Let's see if I want to do item workspace. Okay.
Seth is totally judging right now.
I believe we just talked about what a model
how
should look
nasty
like
your
there,
model
shouldn't we?
should not be. Yeah. All right.
So yeah, so now you can actually see here that again, just beginning to pull in refresh history for some of these reports and see like what the refresh percentage is. So I can see below here, I have basically on a given day what the refresh percentage is. I can see my refresh completed was 80%. And now you can begin to monitor how long did certain things take, what was failing, what time of day was it failing, and I have that combined. Now combine that with the best practice analyzer, and you can actually put this all in one data set. So let's pull this up. Again, this is just a template file, but what Dave did is you can actually see here is all the test runs that's done, and here's the average results. And here in the average score. So you can see, and obviously you can modify this report file, but you can see for each of these models, if I looked at the report we're looking at, hey, don't use floating data types. And you see the unit test, and you can see there's 10 objects in violation of that. So obviously there's a lot we can do with this in terms of saying your rules that people should never be doing, where they should always, the floating data types, highlight those data sets that they're doing. But this is running across my tenant. And so, and you don't have to necessarily create it. It could be any workspace in that, any data set in that tenant or workspace. So now you get that idea of, oh man, you know what? This is a good report here, but these reports are suffering, and then we need to take a look at. So all this is happening from that one particular script that we're looking at here. That's, again, you can see it's running everything and pushing to a file. The possibilities here are endless. This is not a complete model or solution by any means, but just to showcase some of the items that you can do. If you're looking for a good place to start in terms of what repos are really good to start with, look at my particular profile. And I actually tried to be a little needle about this, but basically I have a bunch of starred repos, and I basically put them in lists. So I have like a Power BI repo that is any example of someone's using Power BI in a repository. And I have one for API and PowerShell. So you can see here, best practice client using this deserializer, the Power BI commandlets we talked about, James Bartlett, who's done one, and then even a few for even using the REST API in a Power Query. So all these different examples of what people can do. Start learning. Again, there's that learning curve as always, but this is something that will extend your ability to know your tenant and also really what you can do in the Microsoft platform. So with that, that is everything I got for today. I just want to thank you guys so much. And as I find wherever our streaming is, but that's all I got.
Excellent.
It's sick, Tommy. And you know it is because chat was dead and everybody's like taking screenshots and getting into the GitHubs, and I love it. That's some really powerful stuff that you have compiled and outlined, I think, for everybody, including myself.
I was taking notes. I was looking at stuff, favoriting some GitHub repos, looking at the ones you were picking up here. I picked up the one I really liked, the Python notebooks, or the basically it's the Jupyter notebooks that Alex Powers wrote into PowerShell scripts. I really find it helps to add documentation, or at least some regular word language descriptions about what's going on as you run these various commands. Like, hey, I'm going to install a bunch of things. Here's what this is going to do. Boom. Here's another command. This is going to set up the authentication. And you don't really need to know the code all the way, but you can at least kind of get your way through it. So super helpful there as well. Oh, Tommy, you have the Teams link. Yeah. Okay, yes. So I wanted to I was trying to get into our short link URL shortener, bit.ly, and I cannot seem to, for the life of me, get back in there. So let me see if I can get that going real quick here. And if I can do that real quick, it should allow us to get into our account. And what I'll do, Tommy, is I'll take the Teams link for. So we have a happy hour. So typically, how we run these user groups is we do about an hour long of instructional time. So we've just a little bit over an hour right now. It's 7:11. It's about 11 minutes over. So what we like to do is with to kick into kind of like overdrive mode, right? So this is Stump the Chump. This is hang out with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. So if you have questions, if you hung around this long and still are interested in talking to us, we do like another hour or so to around 8 o'clock or so ish, and just talk more about Power BI, what Tommy was doing. Maybe we just hack on some things together as a group, but it's not recorded, and you can just join the Teams link. So let me just pull the link here real quick, and I'll get that over. Any other final things you wanted to wrap up with, Tommy? Is there any announcements that you have or things that are coming up for any of your closing slides?
Nope. It's really just we got the user groups dusted for late June or lazy June. We got our podcast on Thursday. And like I said, I will make sure in the comments on YouTube, but also following up to give credit where credit's due. Again, thanks to all the people who created those repos. Mine was simply copy and paste with little tweaks. So
awesome. All right. So inside the chat window here is the link to the happy hour. And let me put that in there. All right. Hopefully that will get out to everyone. And I'll also drop it here on LinkedIn as well, just to make sure. With that, I think we're about to wrap. I will close out the stream here. We throw the link here into LinkedIn, and we will join you guys if you'd like on the Teams meeting. So use that link. It's a bit.ly short URL to go to a Teams meeting. Tommy will join you there, and he'll light up the conversation there, and we'll close off the stream. For everyone who hung on, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. Hope you found some of this informative. If there's a couple nuggets in here that you liked, please make sure you like the video. If you don't mind, share it with somebody else. It helps us out a lot as we spread the word around these really cool PowerShell scripts and how they can help you manage your tenant inside Power BI. We'll see you guys hopefully next month. We'll have to come up with a topic. So if you have any, we'll be watching the chat thread on this video. So if you have any topics for next month, feel free to comment in the chat window or make a note on this video of what kind of topics you'd like to learn about in the next upcoming Power BI user groups. All right. Thanks, everyone.